Si sente?
No.
L'ha spento. Ah, scusa. Pronto?
Si sente? Sì, adesso sì. Scusate, Costanza Rizza Casa di A, volevo sapere dal signor Branagh se e come la crisi economica ha impattato sulle sue produzioni e sul suo lavoro in generale.
E se lo ha fatto?
Se
Yes is the answer. Yes, no, I think it has an impact on everyone's. I think we talked a little about the pressure on the independent film market. I think that's tough, and that makes raising money particularly tough. It's just harder in the changing world that we live in to see where people who invest in the films or the television programs will, see their money returned and therefore stay in the business and the game for longer, so that more and more work might be created. And when that's the case, when you can't literally say, here's how and when you might, if we did it very well, get your money back, it's much harder to persuade them to part with it. So I think everybody has to work much, much harder to do some of the same things, and I think they have to be imaginative in different ways, and I think they have to keep up with the ways in which the delivery of, I hate using the word, the delivery of content changes, so that the means by which you present your work to an audience, I think, end up being under constant review. But it's difficult, and you have to be. Some might argue that makes you very much more motivated to be detailed and passionate and to work harder. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, but it's certainly a factor.
Sono io, Marta Bifano della Titania e Logaru Produzioni. Volevo chiedere a Branagh, io non sono convinta che Shakespeare non sia una possibilità di prima serata anche per la televisione, e volevo sapere lui che cosa ne pensava. Noi abbiamo prodotto Caravaggio sfidando la televisione, avendo il massimo dello share, e sono convinta che Shakespeare in prima serata potrebbe essere, e Amleto soprattutto, potrebbe essere un successo enorme, soprattutto per le nuove generazioni che hanno bisogno di conoscere i classici.
Well, I mean, I think I agree with you in as much. I tried to pitch it. I tried to pitch it to Colin Canada a little. Colin Canada, a good friend of ours and a terrific producer, and who ran HBO films in America, and I worked for him several times. And we've talked, and I've talked with other people about the idea of pitching a sort of, whatever you might call it, the soap opera of Shakespeare. I mean, that's probably a silly way to think of it, but yes, it can work. I think that people are becoming a little more imaginative. I know in the UK we have tried to do, I think, pretty successfully. What's your view, for instance, with the novels of Charles Dickens? Recently with Bleak House and with our mutual friend and Little Dorrit. Very detailed, very expensive, very lavishly mounted productions with excellent actors and marvellous directors have been made and presented, as you probably know, in half-hour episodes, 2-3 times a week, or maybe it was
stripped across the week. That's what they was.
Yeah,
like a soap opera, which was very clever and actually very successful.
It was very successful. It was imaginative, and it just, I suppose, it struck quite a good line between not trying to patronise people or hide the fact that they were being given culture in a sugar-coated pill that was brevity, simply, short, so you won't mind it. It actually was finding a way. I suppose that's what I mean, really, is finding the way. So half hours of an evening at the right time was a good way to introduce people to Dickens, who, for some people, would be as rarefied as Caravaggio or Shakespeare or, Cervantes or whatever. So I think where there's the creativity and the imagination, I think it's possible to change some of those rules. So I agree with you.
Io sono Capuano dell'ANSA e le volevo chiedere, lei è partito dai romanzi di Mankell, volevo sapere se lei è un appassionato di gialli, quali gialli gli piacciono, se c'è qualche ispettore televisivo tra i suoi preferiti. Quali sono i suoi progetti futuri? Un po' di domande. E poi volevo sapere se questa miniserie, quanti episodi sono e se avete intenzione di continuare a lavorare sui libri di Mankell o se ci sono altri progetti in questo senso. Grazie.
Do you want to talk a little bit about where we are with the
Well,
Wallander? And this man's making these things all the time. So
we have shot 3 so far last year, and we're doing 3 more this year. They're all 90-minute films, and dependent on Ken's availability and his other commitments, we're very hopeful of continuing the series on. There are, I think, 9 or 10 books altogether.
10, yeah.
But we can, I think, with Menkell's permission and possibly his help, develop some stories beyond that if we need to. I think we'll make them as long as we enjoy making them, and as long as Ken is excited by it, and as long as, I guess, we keep up the standards that we set for ourselves. I mean, already making the second series is challenging, just to continue to try and surprise the audience and to make them as rich and as interesting as the first series. I think detectives are very in vogue at the moment, generally. They certainly are in the UK. I imagine they are here too. You have a very successful one, don't you, set in Sicily. And I think, however much people moan about the genre of detection, in the end, detective stories always have a great beginning, middle and end, and that is something that the audience love. And I can't see it. I've never made so many detective stories in my life.
Well, I've always liked reading, but my mother later in life decided that she liked reading detective stories, so they were all over the house and from all over the world, indeed. So I enjoy them. I admire the ingenuity with which plots are put together. When you think of the finite number of ways in which, the sort of the scenario of either premeditated murders or the appalling nature of some of the crimes that just happen in the world, particularly in cities and in domestic situations, to find ways in which they can illuminate, not just. I think one of the things Mankell does is not simply manipulate story and plot and narrative, although he does it very, very well. But he always uses the advantage, and one of the reasons I think they're regularly done, of the ways in which nearness to crime, nearness to death, nearness to loss brings the emotions of the characters in the piece so close to the surface that they reveal themselves. They reveal elements of human nature that I think can be very illuminating. And so, in that sense, rather like Shakespeare, who puts his characters in profound situations of birth and death, loss, domestic entanglements, it means that there are insights into the human condition that are more easily afforded by these kinds of stories, and you can grade them from the sort of fun and wit and the not taking death seriously in quite the same way of, say, Agatha Christie, for whom it's more of a game, a brilliant parlour game, you might argue, all the way through to Mankell and beyond, where the darkness of the subject matter and the cruelty of human nature is looked at with quite a sort of unremitting and unflinching gaze. And so there's a great sort of range across detective fiction that I enjoy reading both ends of.
You might like to know that one of the one of the detectives we're currently planning to do next is Aurelio Zen, who is an Italian detective based actually in Rome, but hailing from Venice. And that's one of the reasons we're here this week, is to try and find partners on this. And it's being set up very similar to Wallander, but we're finding an unusual resistance from Italian broadcasters to the idea that a non-Italian could play an Italian detective, which is rather interesting.
Dovete convincerli come avete fatto con gli svedesi nell'affidare un ruolo a un attore non del paese di origine. Io